Managing Chaos. Hi, this is Jim Gibson with Business Sense Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I remember many years ago, I was pretty much out of the Marine Corps. I still had 1 day left on my reserved commitment to the Marine Corps. And I got a letter. I got a letter from Headquarters Marine Corps saying that I was ordered back to active duty for the duration of Desert Storm. But I only had a couple hours left. If they would have waited to the end of the day, I would have been confirmed civilian. Well, don't get me wrong. I love the Marine Corps and I love serving my country in the Marine Corps. It was a great experience. They taught me a lot. But I had not been anywhere near the Marine Corps for months now. And in fact, what I did is I actually gave my camouflage uniforms, I believe, to my kids to play in. And I didn't know where half these things were that I was supposed to report back at a certain time, a certain place, in uniform with a haircut. I had long hair at that point. Well, maybe not long hair, but long hair for the Marine Corps. But I was activated for Desert Storm. So I showed up and it was in processing. You know, they got to look at you, make sure you have all your arms and your eyes and your teeth. Make sure that no one is missing any legs or feet. Things like that, and doing all the paperwork. And after the paperwork was all done, they said, hey, we have a special assignment for you. I was sure I was going to go to the Middle East, but they said, nope, you're staying here, and you've been chosen by Headquarters Marine Corps to design and start a new unit. What new unit is this? I asked. Thinking it was going to be some sort of IT unit, communications, running a data center, something like that. And they said, no, you're going to start a company called Holding Company, and you have to design it, and you have to figure it out. And they said, because, see, we activated a lot of people that shouldn't have been activated. In fact, they activated some civilians. I could tell you stories about that. And they also activated a lot of reservists who were not fit to go. One guy showed up, he only had one arm. He was in a car accident. They didn't know about that because he was in what they call the IRR, Individual Ready Reserve, and his time was almost up, and they couldn't send him there, of course. So my responsibility was to design this unit, and I worked hard on figuring out how to do this, and I asked a lot of people in the short week that I had to start this unit up. And I designed it and designed what was going to take place and how it was going to take place and the policies and the procedures and everything that was going to happen when we start receiving people into this unit. Marine Corps was kind enough to give me support. They gave me around 50 Marines. Some of them were regular active duty Marines. Others were reservists like myself at the time. And some of them are retirees that have been in the Marine Corps for 30 years. And boy, those guys really know what they're doing. Those enlisted guys. So I told them what we were doing, how we were going to do it, how the procedures were to take place, what we needed to do, how we in-process people, how we out-process people. Because basically our job was to take people, hold on to them, and then get them back to civilian life as fast as possible. And I didn't expect this, but I got an influx of 3,500 Marines. Well, some civilians too. And I had to figure out where they're going to live, what they're going to eat, where they're going to sleep, how to process them. Then I started getting people who were being held for court-martial. They were some bad dudes. So I had to figure out how to keep an eye on them. I had to figure out how to take care of these women Marines. I got a handful of them who were just new moms, and they were crying, they were upset. Their kids were left thousands of miles away, things like that. I separate them from those waiting court-martial, and then I had to make sure that the people had special needs, such as those who got injured in Desert Storm, make sure that they were going to see their doctor, or someone from my unit was going to go make sure they were being taken care of at the hospital. We put some people in the brigs, the people who were serious offenders had to go there, and then we filled that up pretty quick, so we had to figure out a way to keep track of them. The thing I'm explaining to you right now, more than anything else, it was complete chaos. It was crazy. We were working, 18 hours a day to get these people into the unit and get them at the right place and make sure that they were being taken care of, make sure they were eating, make sure they had a place to sleep. Now I'm going to tell you a story, a little side note. I hope you can bear with me on this. Then I'll explain the main story. There was a gunnery sergeant. He was, he had to be 85, 90 years old, had been retired, I think, from Korea at the time. And he looked like Popeye. He was all skin and bones and everything else, blind in his left eye. And I walked up to him, and he was in uniform too. And I said, Gunny, why are you here? What happened? And he goes, I don't know, but I'm going to go fight for my country. And I said, well, that's an admirable desire. That's pretty cool. But the bottom line is that you've already put your time in the Marine Corps, and my job is to get you home as fast as possible so you can enjoy the fruits of your hard labor with your family. And he said, sir, I don't have a family. He said, my wife died. We never had 8 children. I don't have any brothers, sisters. I'm all alone. I'm all by myself. This is the best thing that ever happened to me. I want to die for my country. And I was impressed with this guy. This is pretty impressive for a gunnery sergeant of almost 90 years old. And I said, but Gunny, you only got one eye. And he said, I only need one eye to shoot a rifle, sir. And I said, you're absolutely right, but I don't think I can let you go to Desert Storm. So after I discussed with him why he wasn't going to Desert Storm, I had to go somewhere on the other side of the base. And when I came back about an hour later, there was an ambulance there. And I said, what happened? And they said, do you know that old Gunny? And I said, yeah. I said, he died. I said, he died? And I realized that he's probably the oldest active duty Marine, because you are on active duty when they call you up. He's probably the oldest active duty Marine to die in Desert Storm. Anyway, side note. But to get back to it, it was chaotic. It was crazy. But it was manageable. And it was manageable because of a couple of things. And you need to keep track of these because chaos will happen to you. It was manageable because I anticipated that it would be chaotic. I anticipated that there was going to be chaos. I planned for it. I thought it through. I had policies in place. Who would do what and when and how. I had procedures. What type of forms that needed to be filled out. In fact, I designed some of those forms. Who would do what when. How we would contact people. Who would be where. All these things were designed ahead of time. So when the influx of all these Marines, 3,500, man, that's a ton of people that needed to be taken care of, needed to be processed. And a lot of them were good Marines. And as you already heard, a lot of them were not good Marines. And they had to be processed. They had to go to court. They had to see their lawyer. And, of course, if they were going to be sent to prison, we had to make sure that we turned them over to the proper authorities to be transported to prison. And we did send a handful of, maybe more than a handful, to Leavenworth. And they deserved to go there. They were guilty of what they did. Some were some pretty nasty crimes. And we took over a whole battalion area, a whole area of Camp Pendleton. And I had so many people that I had barracks in the next area. And I had to keep the women separated from the men. Anyway, a lot of chaos. But the reason why the chaos was manageable is because I was expecting it. And I had plans, procedures, policies, what we were going to do when it happened, who was going to do what, and everything else. And I communicated these clearly to the Marines that were there to help me. And we accomplished our task, and pretty smoothly, by the way. In fact, I got a special award from the Marine Corps because of it. And now, how does this relate to you? Well, when I deal with businesses, and I deal with a lot of businesses over the last couple decades, I realize that some anticipate chaos. Some realize that someday someone's going to break in to their network, that someday the building may fall down, or a pipe will break and flood your data room, and that equipment that isn't quite off the floor is going to suffer problems, and you're going to have power outages. And, of course, if you're in other parts of the country, you're going to have tornadoes and hurricanes. If you're in Southern California, the biggest threat is going to be a earthquake. I've noticed that some companies have thought these all through, that they actually have plans. You know, what will happen if we have an earthquake? What will happen if we have a flood? How are we going to have a business continuity? How are we going to have that plan, the continuity plan, if we have this disaster or that disaster? You better have thought it through, because if not, you're going to be caught flat-footed. And let me tell you, if you lose all your data, what are you going to do? How are you going to run your business? That really is your business. So one of the things I designed in my business is that no matter what happens, if the building burns down and a bulldozer plows over all our IT equipment, I can walk across the street and I can get a couple computers. as many as I need, because they're all standardized the way I designed them, and I hook up to the cloud, and my data is right there in the cloud. And not only that, if California falls into the ocean, my data is scattered. I got copies of it in other parts of the country. Not very expensive. What's expensive is having your building burned down and not having your data. So that's pretty drastic. There was a lady that came into my office one time, and she was having some problems, and a business owner, architectural firm, and she showed me on her smartphone a screenshot. And on that screenshot, I could identify quickly that it was CryptoLocker. And I looked at her and I said, it's not the end of the world. All you need to do is clear out all your computers, everything else, get rid of all the CryptoLocker junk in your computers. And then what you need to do is you need to reload your backup, your data backup. And I said, it should be fairly simple. Your IT person should be able to take care of that. And she said, oh, my IT guy kept the backup attached to the network, and it's also encrypted. And I looked at her and I said, well, then you got some problems, man. This is going to seriously affect your business. How many employees do you have? She had about 20 employees and unable to recover. Few people can recover from that type of situation. And there's ways to do backups, and this podcast isn't here to give you technical ways in what you should do with your backups. It isn't here to give you policies and procedures. It isn't here to tell you that you should have all your computers cookie-cuttered and have the same software, have the same hardware and the same screen and the same everywhere. So if you lose that building and everything comes crashing down, well, then you just buy the same computers. You go across the street and you connect to your backup that's attached to the cloud. Or you go to another state, but you got to think all these things through. If you don't have a plan, chaos will ruin your business. But if you thought it through, and I mean seriously thought it through, I don't mean just sitting there watching TV, eating potato chips and thinking, now, what would I do if there was an earthquake? Well, we got insurance for that. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about seriously sitting down and figuring this out and putting pen to paper and say, earthquake. We had an earthquake at 8 o'clock. What happens? Well, first of all, can you get a hold of your employees and tell them where you're going to meet because your building is now flat? Do your employees know what to do if there's an earthquake, if they're in the building? We used to run earthquake drills, by the way, at my company. Every couple of months, used to show people where the fire extinguishers are, because things like that they forget. They see it every day, but they don't remember. So I would tell them what to do. We'd practice it. But to make a long story short, you had to have these serious plans. You should have a 3-ring binder with all the plans in it ready to go, and no matter what happens. And remember, the hardware, the building, things like that aren't really that important. That's not your business. Your business are your people and your data. And without your people and data, you're not in business. You lose either of those instantly, you're not in business. So you got to have a way to communicate with your people after a disaster, a flood, an earthquake, a tornado, a hurricane. And you got to have procedures and policies. Now, if you have serious procedures and policies, and again, this podcast is too short to talk about what you really need to do. It's just telling you better plan. That's all this podcast is about. Better have plans. If you have plans, then the disaster isn't going to affect you as much. You're still going to lose money. You're still going to have problems. So chaos will happen. As I said before, Murphy's Law. Remember Murphy's Law? For those who don't know what I'm talking about, Murphy's Law says anything bad that can happen will happen. So you plan as if this is something that will happen. So plan on it, have your policies in place, have your procedures in place, and practice them. And that's how you handle chaos, because it will happen to you, and it will happen to your business. If you think it won't, that's when it will. Again, this is Jim Gibson with Business Sense Podcast. Thank you for listening today. If you like these podcasts and you like to support them, if you look in the description down below, you'll see Subscribe Star. That's a service that would take your donations if you want to financially support this type of effort. Also, PayPal is there for the same purpose. Donate $1, donate $5 a month, whatever you would like. It's up to you. But remember this, stuff happens, have a plan. Thank you for listening.